science is still fledgling on the level of the tiny, tiny microcosms, all the little flora and all the little pieces of the earth that are so critical to activating minerals and to activating things in our gut and our biome. Our job is to not be separate from. And so I heard someone say once, it's like, the next great deficiency is just nature deficiency of people realizing not being connected in enough. It starts to create physical, physiological, and mental and spiritual depressions and challenges by just getting too distant from it.
Welcome to the Dandelion Effect podcast, a space for organic conversation about the magic of living a connected life. Just like the natural world around us, we are all linked through an intricate web, a never-ending ripple that spans across the globe. Here, we explore the ideas that our guests carry through the world, remember who and what inspired them along the way, and uncover the seeds that help them blossom into their unique version of this human experience. This podcast is a production of the Feathered Pipe Foundation, whose mission is to help people find their direction through access to programs and experiences that support healing, education, community, and empowerment. Adam Schumaker is co-founder of Gray Bear Lodge, a rustic retreat center in Hohenwald, Tennessee, 80 miles southwest of Nashville, that hosts experiential workshops to promote growth, fulfillment, and the joy of learning. He's a certified Watsu practitioner, lifelong yogi, and potentially one of the kindest people on the planet. Gray Bear opened in 1996, and the Feather Pipe Ranch was a big influence on its beginnings, as Adam considered the ranch to be one of the grandfathers of the movement, one of the holders of the seeds, he says. When he and his partner Diann visited Helena in '99, India Supera welcomed them with open arms, sharing everything she had learned about running a retreat center, from the kitchen and cooking details to employee structure, accounting, lodging, and more. Adam recalls her saying, "We need places like Gray Bear and the Feathered Pipe, and if you're the generation bringing this up, all the wisdom and all the experience I have, I want to share it with you. Feel free to call me anytime." And he did. It's hard to pinpoint themes in this conversation as we meander gently through many topics. We weave stories with conscious teachings and personal experience with the memories that touch our hearts and open our perspectives. Adam believes stories are integral to learning. He calls it life teaching life, the ability to connect with each other outside of the boundaries of any structured tradition or discipline. We talk about the power of nature to remind us what's important, the necessity of digital detoxing and breaking the modern habit of immediate availability, and how building Gray Bear over the last 30 years has actually built him into the person he is today. A process that has invited in the opportunity for profound personal development, accountability, and reflection. There are many gems in this interview, but the one that really sticks out to me is a quote from one of his yoga mentors. "Live life as if one foot is in the presence of the almighty divine God being imaginable, and as if your right foot is in a fresh cow patty that you've accidentally stepped in." All that to say, don't take life too seriously. Don't forget to laugh and find the lightness and the miracle of being alive. After this conversation, I'm excited to get out to visit Gray Bear in person one day and to see how the real-life dandelion effect of the Feather Pipe Ranch has reached well beyond the borders of the American West. I'm Andy Van Treese, and you're listening to the Dandelion Effect podcast, Season 3, Episode 8, with my friend, Adam Schumaker. As the co-founder and owner of Gray Bear Lodge, a retreat center that offers a lot of different types of programs, but primarily yoga programs over the years, I want to start this conversation really simply and ask you to tell me about what your relationship with the practice of yoga has been over the years, and how did you get started with it? Where did that enter your life?
One of the things that drew me to yoga early on, I started in the 90s, is an Iyengar class. I loved hearing and was amazed by how my instructor could be upside down, backwards, doing a head balance pose, and her voice wouldn't change. How is she holding that calm, steady presence? She can't be doing it with effort. It's like she was tapping into something else. And the first moment I had this idea that yoga could be something completely different than what my like even early beginnings of it was. I'd taken a little break from college and was living in Europe, in England. And I went to a yoga class. And at the time I was way heavy fitness, like, chiseled
Okay.
out, lifting weights, pushing it, just typical American kind of going that route. I was the youngster in the class and a bunch of ancient, 30-year-olds were in there.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And as we went through the practice, I found myself shaking and sweaty and pushed. And I looked around and I was easily in the best physical shape and wasn't even close to being calm and steady in what was happening. But
Mm-hmm.
it really woke me up. Like there's something to explore here. I love how a practice, we can get some discipline that ends up being like, it informs our vehicle of perception, who we are, how we see the world, how we interact with it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's when I get just like, if this helps me by doing this practice to perceive life in a more beautiful way, to be able to walk with someone I love and see a sunrise or a sunset, or just whenever the flitter of some moment, we're interacting with another human being and the emotion of the moment can overwhelm the communication, but
Mm-hmm.
instead we can see it for what it is. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I can take a breath. This person's having a difficult time right now. I can be with it. I can calm down and listen with my deeper intuition and
Mm-hmm.
then connect with what's really happening. And that to me is where this practice is phenomenal.
Yeah. And I think what's so interesting about that and exactly what you're speaking to is that there are so many ways into this window of perception. Some people use yoga, some people
Mm,
use cooking and eating. I just watched this Chef's Table episode with a monk from South Korea. This monk is one of the world's best chefs, and she's never been trained as a
mm-hmm.
chef. It is her practice. It's presence. It's her presence. It's her
Right.
savoring the food. They have a big garden on site, and there's just all these different avenues into presence and perception. I think it's just so fun. Like there's so many options in life. It doesn't have to be yoga. It doesn't have to be qigong. It doesn't have to be Watsu, which I know that you're into. It doesn't have to be hiking. Like it can be all of those things and so many more.
Mm-hmm. 100% with you. It's the great common thread through all these modalities and spiritual practices is presence. Sometimes the greatest yogic practice I ever see is someone who's fishing on the river.
Yes. Yes.
That's it. All of what you're saying, I'm with that because it's like it can be cross stitching, it can be gardening, and people really truly find that beautiful ease of being present. Rock climbers are amazing at it because what I love about rock climbers is they're literally like, will this piece of earth lend me her support?
Yeah.
And every time they're trusting their strength, their flexibility, the earth to hold them or not to hold them.
And there's a lot at stake.
Yeah, totally, totally, totally. We had this amazing moment building our yoga room at Gray Bear. And it was a kind of a big deal for us because we started off as a small little scrappy startup effectively with Gray Bear in 96. And we were to the point then we wanted to build a beautiful dedicated yoga room. As much like Feather Pipe, we did all of our initial courses just in our main lodge. And so we started building this yoga room and got to a certain point with it. And then we actually needed to get some extra help to help us. We did an old fashioned barn raising when we put up the walls and just had a bunch of yoga friends and community members all show up. And it was like 30 people showed up and it was just fun and beautiful and amazing. Stood up all the walls and got the roof on it and had this beautiful platform and just amazing beginning. And then we needed someone, construction workers, to help step in and help with some drywall and pieces there. It was almost Christmas, and this local worker in a little town near where we are pulled into the property, and I've known him for years. And he goes, I've had a job kind of fall through, and we're just a few weeks out from Christmas, and my workers need some work. And I'm wondering, I know you're getting ready to do drywall, if I could help you at the yoga room. He goes, I won't even have to be paid. And it was just like this amazing moment that showed up. And I was like, I would love for that to happen. I said, when can you start? He goes, right now. We're on those ladders. And they got out and literally just got out and started doing it just like that. And what was so phenomenal about the moment is as we started working with him, and he's just a local guy, born right here locally, never hardly traveled outside the state of Tennessee. He's the kindest, most centered, gentle soul of one I've ever met. And just so clear in how he would work with you, putting the mud on the drywall and gently easing it. And he made suggestions to us, like all of our doorways. He said, I did some work out in Arizona. And he goes, I love looking at the rounded archways. And so he made this beautiful, gentle archways with every door we have. And it was like he ended up teaching us about the most lovely Buddhist, calm, centering ways. He's never done yoga to this day, never done meditation to this day, and was one of our great teachers.
That is so amazing. And I was telling a friend that I just really enjoy meeting people, talking with people who are deeply connected and deeply what maybe I would consider to be spiritual, but there's no new age jargon. Maybe they've never stepped foot in a formal class of what modern day would consider to be like being on a spiritual path. But there's such a connection with land. There's such a groundedness in their energy. I find a lot of times it's people who have some connection to like the cycles of life. And I've interviewed farmers on this podcast, and there's such a connection to magic, really.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
More and more, I'm so fascinated by people who have these, I want to say traits, but it's not traits. I don't know what the word is.
It's a listening skill.
Yeah.
There is this place where we start to realize that nature's really the teacher. It's Earth, like, we're composed of this planet. We're beings here. And once we get that and start to really get it and get out of our heads, and I think that's one of the dangers right now. Like you said, the new agey teaching. It's like the information age. We're getting the backlash of some of this. Yes, it's important to have information and have all these digital things at our fingertips, which is truly, truly a magical, amazing thing, and comes with a downside. And it's like our brains can get stuffed with it and people can regurgitate it. And it's like a danger I see, actually, I think, in all of the mind, body, yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong, anything, is they start to somehow they've got the brain teachings of this, but it's not connected. It's not interwoven. It's not in the grounded feet of the experience. Right. And that's it. And so, yes, I think that when we do see people who are just living connected to Earth, and from that place, they're teaching and they're sharing, it's authentic and it's lovely. Our grandparents knew these things in many ways. It's like, this is what works. And, not in any way diminishing this, but I see all the fancy terms we have for growing a simple garden, all the permaculture things. And I understand it. I understand the teaching around it, but it's also rooted in the oldest teachings. This is what truly works.
Well, I know that nature as medicine is one of the pillars of Gray Bear. Gray Bear started with a plot of your family's land. I'd love to start to dive into that story and to hear a bit about what your connection was with this land, because I know that there's been this symbiotic relationship.
The roots of it, my father was from Chicago, had traveled around the United States a little bit, purchased some land in Tennessee, and was going to do a back to nature and live on the land. And, this was in the 80s, and was going to try and establish himself that way. And pretty quickly realized being totally off grid with no electricity, no running water, was a lot more challenging than he thought it was going to be.
Of course.
And it was just a reality check. And that didn't quite work out. And it's set for some time. And things that set for some time can go into disrepair and kind of neglect. And I was in college. I'd love to say that it was this great epiphany and this mind body and this moment of enlightenment, and a ray of sunshine burst through the clouds and gave me this energy. But the reality was, it was a breakup with a girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
I went back to this land. I would close the gate, just be back on the land by myself for 2 or 3 days, 4 days at a time,
Mm-hmm.
sleeping on the ground in a sleeping bag, a trillion stars, no noise pollution, no other human beings, started quieting me inside like nothing else on the planet did.
Mm-hmm.
That was the root. It's like I started feeling how the magic of listening to the whippoorwills or the pileated woodpeckers or hearing the owls call at night, hearing how wind will move through a forest of oaks and hickories and poplars. And it wasn't a yogic thing. And of course it was.
Right.
It was the deepest, quietest peace with me. And that really started moving me towards, what could this be? You had to have, at the time I started this, a 4-wheel drive vehicle to get back into the property and know how to drive it. Just having a 4-wheel drive wouldn't do it. You had to, it was rustic by far. And so just started developing and working and cleaning and taking some time. And over a little time that I was doing yoga in Nashville, over in the Berry Hill area, and at an Iyengar class. And I would tell a few friends about what was happening and what I was kind of into. And over the course of months and years, working, cleaning, being with it, a few friends would come down from yoga class and we'd spend the weekend and, work on different projects. And we'd sleep in the back of a pickup truck under the stars. And inevitably somebody had a guitar. They'd take it out and play some music. And it just started shaping and forming. And one weekend, after that had been going for a while, I kind of looked up and we had like 25 people back there.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a large gathering before Gray Bear was Gray Bear. And we were just there gathered around and we did some yoga and just told stories and sat around the campfire and shared who we were and what we were dreaming of and working with and being challenged by. And this community started forming. And that evening was the night I'm like, wow, Gray Bear's being born right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's happening.
Mm-hmm.
That's when it started really becoming something. And so then we just started developing on that. And I wanted, and we've done this to this day. When you come to Gray Bear, it's not that we've brought in big bulldozers and cleared out large swaths of areas. We more try and mold and merge with the land.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll kind of tuck our little cabins into a little empty place in the forest. And you walk into this, 12 by 16 cabin. We've designed all the cabins so that you walk in on like the low side of the roof, which may be 8 foot tall, and it goes up into a 12-foot ceiling. So you've got this deep slant, and on the other wall, I put large 6 or 8 foot windows.
Okay.
So when you step inside to the building, it immediately draws you back out, and it frames nature. So your back window is just this beautiful forest. And Patricia Walden was sleeping in her cabin one night when she was there. If you know Patricia, she's a yoga teacher extraordinaire. Mm-hmm. And she laid in her bed, and it was like a queen size bed. And she said, Adam, she goes, I laid in that bed and looked up at the stars and those large windows. And she goes, I felt something I've not felt since I was like a 7-year-old girl. And just feeling a connection to earth and to stars and to beauty in a way I just had forgotten. I want us to be comfortable, but not ever lose connection with knowing that you're visiting the forest. Know who's visiting who. When Diann and I were creating Gray Bear, and we said, and like our little vision and our mission statement, I was like, well, how large do you want Gray Bear to be? And I'm like, I always want to have more trees than people.
That's a really good marker.
That's kind of the thing. I feel like many, many, many of our life problems and political issues and struggles could really, truly be shifted if you sit by a little creek and watch the salamanders and the frogs and just watch a leaf fall and drift down and just quiet and listen to that. There's a true magic that puts things in perspective.
This idea of who's visiting who. I was at the Feathered Pipe. I think it might have been the first full summer I was there in 2017, and I was doing kind of an exchange with them where I would go to the retreats and I would write about my experience there, and I would interview the teacher and some of the guests. And my background was in freelance writing and professional writing. So I would shape an article and try to get it published because it was at a time where they were really wanting to build up an online presence. But in between doing that, I would do some weeding just around the property. And India was always like making up ways for me to be able to stay, hey, maybe you can help us with this and help us with this. I was like weeding in one of the areas and there were all these aspen roots. The aspens just have their connected roots basically all over the property underneath the whole lawn. And so there's always these tiny little shoots of aspens popping up everywhere. And of course, if your job is to weed, that this is like the bane of your existence,
Right.
I'm just like exhausted one day after weeding, and I'm sitting right outside of the chalet, and Crystal's husband, Johnny, was sitting down, and I sat next to him and he's like, how's it going? And I said, I think I'm done for the day. Gosh, these aspens, they're just so invasive. And I just went on this whole thing about these aspens. They're not supposed to be here. We have this lawn and blah, blah, blah. And all he said was, well, they were here first. I think we're the invasive species,
Right,
and it was just
right.
like, oh yeah, you're right. It's this interesting dance and this interesting relationship that we have with nature where it's like, we can clean it up. We can design with it. We can manage it, try to, air quotes. But really when it comes down to it, it creates the home. We're just in it.
What I think I would also add to what you're saying, and what I think complements it, is that science is still fledgling on the level of the tiny microcosms, all the little flora and all the little pieces of the earth that are so critical to activating minerals and to activating things in our gut and our biome that are so needed on these tiny little levels, to the point that we simply can't even yet to begin to understand them. And I don't think we even, on some levels, need to, in a certain sense. Our job is to not be separate from. And so I heard someone say once, it's like, the next great deficiency is just nature deficiency, of people realizing not being connected in enough. It starts to create physiological, and mental and spiritual depressions and challenges by just getting too distant from it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think that when you do have that connection, and when you're kneeling out there on the earth and you're pulling up some weeds and being with it and present with it, it's like it's actually one of Diann's mentors, a man named Paulus Berenson. He was a sculptor and a dancer, just an amazing human being in the mountains of North Carolina. And he just taught us so much, just a wonderful person. And he used to say, as he would walk, he goes, our footsteps and our imprints were shaping the earth's clay. As a potter, he goes, we're working with it. Every time you step on the earth, it's giving you a feedback signal and a loop to know how to interact with earth as a deep ecologist. And so listen, let that feedback always inform you. And of course, that's Qigong is always opening up that loop and that cycle. And that's what we're doing with prana and with the work. And that's what we get. We just walk with and sit with and pull those little weeds. You end up getting this amazing cycle of life connected back with us. That's critical to keeping us healthy. And these other life problems that get so huge in our mind, this that cognitively impact us and get out of proportion, they start to go away. They start to kind of fall back into perspective. And all of a sudden, this sense of like something being larger than life itself, and this event and this piece we're navigating, like, in second thought, if I just like the interconnected roots, you put it in a new perspective, that problem is no longer as big as we thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
And we can, and, like the great sage Winnie the Pooh said, sometimes I accomplish a couple of impossible things before breakfast,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that's what we do. Something so impossible, so ridiculous, we go, wait, here's a way to navigate this.
Yeah, yeah. And with the help of mentors and guides and friends along the way, right? You just mentioned one of Diann's mentors, and I'd love to hear a bit about your relationship with India Supera.
Mm-hmm.
There's a connection decades ago of when you were first starting Gray Bear and coming to the Feather Pipe and meeting India. And it sounds like she really took you under her wing in a way.
Absolutely. Lovely segue and directly connected. She was rooted. She was connected. She was with that land. And, so that alone is everything we're talking about. But where her influence was profound with me, one is on those early days, sleeping on, what is Gray Bear now, on the earth. And I would think and pursue. I had the old feathered pipe catalog way back in the day when my teacher would speak of feathered pipe as, one of the grandfathers of this whole movement, one of the holders of the seeds. Mm. And so it was on my bucket list. Like, I want to get out there and see what they do and how they do it and how it speaks to me. There were a few retreat centers, Omega and Esalen and Kripalu and Feathered Pipe. And Feathered Pipe was the one that really I wanted to get to. Mm-hmm. Diann and I went to the Omega Institute, and amazing place, and love it. Absolutely. And they've been what I would call like the college campus of opening up a whole lot of this, and just amazing with the programs they do and the teachers and all those pieces and holding the space. What I also found from going with Omega is I'm like, Gray Bear is not going to be Omega. Mm-hmm. Did I want a cafeteria where there were several hundred people having a meal? I knew I didn't. Mm-hmm. That wasn't, again, more trees than people. I knew that simply wasn't our calling. And that took me back to Feathered Pipe. The size and the scale from everything I'd heard was just right. And so, JJ Gormley is a dear friend and had come to Gray Bear, and we just love her energy and her sparkle and her insight and who she is. And she was like, hey, I'm going to be out at Feathered Pipe in the summer. You should join me. And I was like, I'm down with that. I would love to create that. And so Diann and I were taking a little sabbatical. We took our Subaru, loaded it up with a few fun little pieces, including Diann's hula hoops, and we traveled out west and just went state to state on a big fun adventure as we were making our way to Feathered Pipe. Mm-hmm. And Indy and I had already corresponded, and between the disciplines I was coming and what we'd been doing. And so when we got there, she immediately, without hesitation, just pulled us into the embrace of the space. Mm. Gave me a lovely tour and walked around, and even to the point she's like, here's the kitchens and here's how we cook what we're doing and here's how we store our sundry goods and everything. Just to really show this is how a retreat center becomes a retreat center. So it was both the vision, the energy of the space, and just the practical matters. Like, yeah. Do you have enough coffee cups? I'm like, oh yeah, right. That's a thing. Right? Yeah. That was what was so phenomenally supportive of me, especially at that time, because we were just getting up and going and doing what we were doing. India said something that I've always held dear. She just said, we need places like Gray Bear and like Feathered Pipe. Mm-hmm. She goes, we need them. And she goes, if you're starting something and you're the generation bringing this up, all the wisdom and all the experience I have, I want to share with you. Mm. So feel free to call. And she was like, here's our budget. Here's how we do what we do, just everything. Mm-hmm. And it was really lovely. As a matter of fact, at one point too, I was like, well, what can I do to help? Just kind of, I want to show some gratitude. She goes, do you know how to sweep a yoga room floor? And I'm like, well, yes, I do. And so it's on a very practical level. And I love that. And so Diann and I would sweep the floor and keep it all nice and neat. And for decades, I had the picture of Diann at Feathered Pipe laying over a bolster. It was a picture we had on Gray Bear's website of like how to relax and renew yourself. And that was a shot we had of Diann there doing it. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I really took home from India, from Feathered Pipe, was that she shared her stories. It was a lovely part of her connecting with everyone who was there. We'd sit down, gather around, and she would just share stories about
Mhm.
what had happened in her journey and like cobras crawling into sleeping bags and all kind of amazing, amazing things.
Mhm.
And I remember talking with Diann. It's like, it's wild when you really think about it. A lot of the great teachers, that's what they did. They would teach their passion and their program. Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Buddha, everyone. What they would do is share their stories because it's really life teaching life. It's us connecting with each other.
Mhm.
It's outside of the boundaries of any tradition, outside of the boundaries of any particular discipline. It's us relating to life, humanity, souls connecting through our stories.
Yeah.
And she really, really inspired me with that. And to this day, that's an anchoring point of Gray Bear. We bring in these luminaries, these amazing teachers to teach some subject. And many, many, many times, the greatest gift we get is while we're walking through the forest, sharing about some story and how something's unfolding with us.
Mhm.
And that lights the light bulb that we need to like, oh, wow, I needed to put some light on that inside of myself. Right. And
Yeah.
it's like, hell,
Yeah.
and that's the piece. That's it. But you have to have space and time to do that.
I was just thinking that because some of my most profound understandings or profound aha moments have happened in nature, either at the feather pipe. I mean, I've had many just in the mountains in Montana, but it's like this cascade of events that, we're always just grabbing a little seed of an idea here from this person. And then we talk to somebody
Mm-hmm.
else. Well, oh, wow. Well, they said that this is what they did and this is
Right.
what they're learning from their experience. Okay, let me just take that little piece. And then all of that is in here somewhere, it's being filed
Mm-hmm.
away.
Mm-hmm.
It's being like archived. And then having that space, like I love how you say the greatest teachings are walking to the yoga room or at the Feather Pipe Ranch. I think of just how people lay around on the lawn or they lay on the dock of the lake or, I've gotten really good ideas laying on this new nature deck that we built 2 years ago that overlooks the lake. And it's like, all of these little bits from other people's stories just align in like the perfect moment. And there's
Right.
space for it to land. There's space for
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
idea to really come, into full being.
Exactly. And in particular, because I think you're also circling something so critical, you have to hold enough space inside there, like leave room. One
Mm-hmm.
of one of the challenges we're facing in today's world, we pack every moment.
Yeah.
It's like the schedules are so tight. It's like, oh, there's 13 minutes between this and the other. Well, I can send out so many emails and et cetera, text. But it's like every moment is too crowded with it. And somehow we're being sold on this concept that multitasking is really where it's at. Right. And it's like taking us away from like the simplicity. So it's one of the things I saw from Feather Pipe that I loved. Leave space.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes in today's world, it means we literally schedule time where there's nothing scheduled.
Yeah. I feel really, really protective over my do nothing time. Like
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I just so cherish time with the ocean, time at the beach, time with the
Right.
sunrise and the sunset. Like it's just these living moments that I'm not doing anything except for being present. Funny enough, that's not doing nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Oh, absolutely.
you actually are a lot of times more engaged and more present when you're doing nothing than you are
Mm-hmm.
when you're like deep into, multitasking or trying to juggle a bunch of things or write emails or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's like if we can gather at a place where we limit or restrict or just take a break from, a little fast from the static of confusion, of busyness. And we just take a little space to go, okay, I can sit down my cell phone and take 2 or 3 days and just be away from it. I've actually started, we always open every circle with a check-in at Gray Bear.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things of late I've been asking is like, how many people in this circle have gone in the last 3 months, 3 days and not touched your cell phone? It's amazing to see that number shrink down to zero.
Yeah.
It's happening. And as human beings, we aren't designed to be on call 24/7, right? It's not how we function so well. And so when we can create these pauses, when we create a space to go, I need to have, like you say, the scheduled free time. That's how this practice and how our life is rich and connected.
I think this is a good chance for me to ask this question that I'm really curious about. You've had Gray Bear for almost 30 years now, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And have welcomed in a lot of people and shared stories with a lot of people. Like, I'm sure that you have heard from people of what their challenges are, what they're going through, what they're seeking. What have you seen as far as behavior change or just human evolution? Are people seeking the same things that they were seeking 30 years ago? Are they coming in differently than they were 15 years ago, 30 years ago? I'm just so curious from your perspective and from where you sit, like what you have learned about kind of where we're going.
Great question. What I've seen that's shifted over time is initially people would show up and it was a brand new concept, just simply trying to think about, what a downward dog might look like, or the concept of taking time for oneself, to taking a break. That alone was its own new concept.
Mm-hmm.
We would hold courses on how to remake your kitchen and how to have healthy things in your pantry. Why white flour may not be the best thing to be putting in our bodies all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And, the benefits of vegetarianism, things of that nature. So we teach a lot of really, really basic courses on how and why. That's began to shift because certainly all that information, we can access that information easily now.
Mm-hmm.
And so that part of it is like, okay, that's not as needed in today's world. We can Google that in a moment. The gathering of some of those building blocks of information aren't as critical, but the pieces that totally empower us to use them, the inspiration, what motivates us to live the best life we can. That part is like the thread that runs current through all of this to today, from the very first day to now. We're hungry for ritual and connection. We're hungry for authenticity. We're really wanting that. It's almost like we've reached this point that the selling, the commercialism, which we need, I understand, but the selling of so much of it ends up that a lot of people purchase a lot of items that are effectively styrofoam for their lives.
Mm-hmm.
They aren't nutritious. It's like when they're trying to consume something that after the consumption, they're like, I don't feel that vitality. I don't feel that drive. I don't feel that need, like I want to go out and connect and be alive and be engaged. And the falseness of that is really woken up in our society.
I think so too.
Yeah. People are going, I can't pretend like this is normal. It's okay. I love to quote one of the great prophets of our day, Lily Tomlin. She has this bit where she says, the problem with the rat race is whether you win or whether you lose, you're still a rat.
Right. It's like being back in right relationship with these things.
Yeah. And so that's what I see people showing up. And when they get back to Gray Bear, it's like a deep remembering. It's like we shake off some of the crustiness of living our modern lives where things aren't quite landing or penetrating in this fertile soil. And instead you wake up and go, wow, I need more simple things as a part of my living. Simplicity isn't broken. People are really, truly wanting and craving that.
Something that you're really trying to provide for people is the opportunity to unplug. What's available as far as technology there, and what are you kind of hoping people do with it when they're there?
We built a little dedicated Zoom room, and it's about a quarter of a mile from our main lodge. And it's up a steep hill, like literally. And so, yeah, no exaggeration at all. So when you need to get online, we're just like, put your hiking shoes on, truck on up the hill. And it's a beautiful, it sits, we've got a little orchard behind it. We've put nice large windows in it. We've had several teachers, Chris Connieris and JJ and Mary Pafford, have taught classes there. And so they can do a Zoom class while they're on the spot. And our guests can go use it anytime they want to. It's beautiful, quiet. Matter of fact, the last time I was speaking with JJ, actually, she said, Adam, she goes, would you pause for a second? I love hearing all the whippoorwills and the nightlife behind you right now. So you could just, they were just so loud and abundant, kind of like your roosters were. It's just a beautiful piece. So we have that for the practicality of needing to do those things. Mm-hmm. But around the main lodge, we don't. So we don't offer Wi-Fi. We don't make it available. And my standard operating is like, even once guests pull on, often we just simply just disconnect the whole router. So it's just like I unplug from it too and just turn the thing off and just simply take a break, because where we are is rural enough by design that there's tiny, if any, cell phone. You walk back up to the Zoom room and you get cell phone, no problem. But it's like we have enough trees, like plenty of them, that it just naturally blocks any signal from arriving. I've shared this story before. There was one point I saw a young man walking around with his iPhone out in the courtyard area around the main lodge. And I walked out and I said, we do try and ask for digital silence. I said, I appreciate you kind of not having your phone out. And he was so kind and so cool. He said, oh, no. He goes, I'm actually just want to make sure that I didn't have a signal. And that's where I wanted to sit down and spend some time for a while. Isn't that cool?
Yeah, that's really cool. It's so funny because in a lot of my travels, like I have been really wildly surprised by where cell phone service and Wi-Fi service reaches these days. Still to this day, there's places in the US, like rural places in the US that I have found have less service than like being on a mountaintop in the Himalayas.
Right.
There's a lot of places in Montana still. And I think that's a reason why I love it, because there's so many stretches of road, which is like kind of dangerous, but there's so many stretches of road where you don't have any cell phone service. You can't get in touch with anybody. Most of the hikes that I would do around Bozeman and Helena, no service. It's places that you can go, like this guy, where it's like, no, I'm making sure that I don't have it because then I'm not available. My brain just like, it leaves my mind as even an option. And you can tell people like, hey, didn't have service. Right. It really helps with this like obsession with availability that I think runs our society these days. It's like,
and the instantaneousness of it. If someone doesn't hear from you in 3 minutes, they hit the panic mode.
I felt so bad of what I was having, like how often I was contacting you just to even set this up. Cause I was like, I'm about to go into silence. I really want to do this interview. And I was watching my own behavior in that communication and going like, okay, like this is something that we're actually going to talk about today. And it's interesting because it's happening all the time in how we're scheduling things, how we expect people to write back, what is appropriate amount of time, like how that's different for everybody. I mean, being in Mexico for the winter has been really interesting because the pace of life here is completely different than the pace of life in America. And my brother just visited for 5 days and he's been to Mexico a couple times, never to this town that I live in. It was just funny to watch, like, we sit on the beach and get a little umbrella and we're posted up there for a couple hours and the server shows up maybe 20 minutes after we arrive and it's like, hey, like, do you want anything? And then we get our drinks, I don't know, 10 minutes later, and then he disappears and we were cracking up because we had ordered something like 20 minutes ago and we're like, did they forget? We're like really trying to figure out, like, should we ask again? Do you think this is appropriate amount of time? Do you think they forgot? And here comes our server with snorkel gear he just like takes his shirt off and puts his snorkel gear on and goes and gets in the water.
I love
and my
it.
brother's like, well, there goes our server. We still hadn't gotten what we ordered, and we were cracking up, and there was frustration, there was confusion. Like for me, I've been here long enough where I was like, whatever, we don't have anywhere to go. Like we have water. We're not going to, die if we don't get these drinks.
Mm-hmm.
Like one thing I really love to do at the ranch is to watch. So people are there for Saturday to Saturday, usually a week long, and you just watch people settle in.
Yes.
First day, there's some nerves. There's like most people coming from bigger cities, obviously, traveling there to get some, find some peace and tranquility. There's a buzz, there's excitement, there's nerves, there's whatever. People are kind of taking a bunch of pictures, and then you watch their nervous systems shift really into parasympathetic. And then by Tuesday, Wednesday, definitely Thursday, people are napping in the middle of the lawn. They're on the canoe. You're not seeing phones out. People aren't even taking as many pictures because they're really just being there.
Right.
And it's so beautiful to watch. And the tone and the cadence of their voice changes. They're doing yoga, they're getting in the sauna, they're sleeping well. Like it's everything about people changes once they're settling in and they're off technology.
Yeah, that's it. We're walking around exhausted in modern society and just over multitask. Diann always says it takes a day or two to get the city off of you, is the way she likes to phrase it, right?
Yes.
We've lost the ability to sit with some of the questions right now because of the Google grabbing the phone and doing it. Curiosity and sitting with something and pondering it and letting it sift through us and our awareness, and like maybe spin it around 3 or 4 ways. Look at it the way that your friend sees it. Maybe it has a completely opposing viewpoint to yours, but see how she or he sees it. Give it time. Let it settle, rather than we look it up, have the instantaneous answer, toss it. It's gone. It's dismissed. So being in a place which is a little more quiet allows that introspection. When you get on Gray Bear's website, to this day still, you can't just click and sign up and pay for a retreat. You enroll, but then I'll correspond back with whoever the person is. And sometimes it takes me a while. It may take a couple of days. We send a little thing back that says, hey, thank you. We'll get back with you. Part of why I've done that is just to make sure that we've got a good fit. In today's world, people can click and sign up for something, and they may be signing up for 3 things on the same weekend to see which one they choose to go do or whatnot. And then it may be that they're enrolling in something and they sign up for Gray Bear and they go, oh, wait, I don't have TVs in my rooms and we don't have internet and et cetera, et cetera. I'm like, no, that's not what we do. And we, do no alcohol personally. We do at Gray Bear. So they just know this is who we are and what we do. And so I have the time to correspond with that person individually. It takes a little effort, but it ends up meaning that this group of like-minded souls and kind people from around the country show up in the same place at the same time and relate to each other. It's like, it's like this tribe is formed. And so, and it allows me to hear that person where they are, if Gray Bear feels like a good time for them to be there. There was this woman I spoke with who's a yoga teacher from Atlanta, Georgia, and she was signing up for one of our teachers' trainings. And when I spoke with her, it was obvious she was busy and wide open, just wide open. And that's cool. And, when you're in the city and things are moving, that's where you're at. I get there some too. But I intentionally was like, set with it for a moment and just ask her a few questions, making sure that it all lined up. As I was asking questions, I could hear her just like, hey, I've got my credit card, I'm ready to pay. And I'm like, okay, well, let me ask another question. And she's like, hey, I've got my credit card, I'm ready to pay. So, okay, we're all cool. It's all fine. And later in closing circle, she goes, I was such a basket case. I was just like screaming in my mind going, Adam, take my credit card. I'm ready. And it's the opposite of what most of our culture does. Give me your credit card, paid, done, gone. Click, invoice, over.
Yeah.
I both want Gray Bear to be a place which is progressive. And so we're embracing new ideologies and where things are going. And I want to stay rooted to like the steadfastness.
Mm-hmm.
These are simple, time-honored practices that bring us back to who we are.
I know that you've had a really impressive lineup of programs and of teachers with Rodney Yee, and I think you mentioned Deskachar even came and visited. Say like this season, like what is the diversity of programs that you're offering? Is it primarily yoga, or is it kind of across the board of different offerings that just connect people to themselves and to land?
Because we have such a background in yoga, it's definitely a through line that runs with this. It's like we'll offer yoga courses quite often, but it is definitely a large smattering of programs. So we'll have like one of our courses that we have coming up now is there's an MD who she is helping to work with other MDs, other doctors in through America at how to look at holistic means of like say opioid withdrawal and like the wrecking of lives that it creates and understanding the psychology, the physiology of it, the withdrawal process of it, how it affects patients and their own lives. And so she's put together an amazing program that helps really, truly realize that, yes, we can change pain thresholds. We can change the way we interact with these diseases and these addictions through mind body means very specifically. So that's one of the courses we're doing. We've got a gathering where like attorneys will come to Gray Bear who practice law and we've had like this one yoga teacher, attorney's been coming to Gray Bear for years. She's developed a course of how in the practice of lawyering, you don't want to lose your soul. You don't want to lose your kindness because you both need to have that tiger and that steeliness that comes up, but you don't want to lose relating to beauty and lightness and gentleness and remembering that we all want the same thing at heart. And it's a process and we lose that. So she's specifically working with attorneys to like, here's how to care for yourself and to keep that spark alive. We strive to bring in these amazing, amazing human beings who've done their work. You know, they embody these teachings. It's not someone, and again, not to lighten this or disrespect it. It's not someone who's taken a weekend training course and now they're teaching a subject. It's someone who's had decades of Kenneth Cohen, who's just like, taught Qigong and lived the practice for 40 years. He's traveled around the world with it. It's deeply, deeply scholarly, embedded in the being of who they are. They know these subjects and it's like the wisdom of them are deeply rooted. So we bring in these teachers, and then we all get to benefit from studying and being with them and the wisdom that they share with it. And it helps to craft who we are.
Yeah.
And I remember one of the most powerful retreats we've done to this day. It was a group out of Memphis called Loving Arms. It was an HIV support group for African American women. And this was in like 97, 98, I believe. And they had hired an instructor. It was a Native American mask making retreat. So they did drumming and dancing and mask making. And the part of the process was that we would do plaster. And so each person would partner up and you would lay down these plaster pieces and sculpt your face and then remove that and then look at yourself. While you knew you were going through this journey of having HIV.
Yeah.
And look into your own self, paint and create that process and be with you now and who you are, your dreams, your visions, all of it. It was such a powerful process.
I can imagine.
The women were anywhere from 20 years old to, in their 40s and 50s and 60s, the whole range of society. And to be with them and to be with this process, it took every other life issue you and I are struggling with or the pieces we're going through and shrank them. It put them on this tiny little place as these women were just saying, this is who I am now. Like one of the women had on the altar that we had at Gray Bear, she was, this is the man who gave me this disease. I barely knew him and it changed the course of my life. She was releasing any of the holding of that, any of the bitterness or the anger of that, just letting it go because it didn't serve her anymore.
Right.
And so we had this powerful process of like, dancing and moving. I mean, we had these dances that were just like the greatest rave party you've ever been to in your life. And the joy of it and the deepest tears in the quietest places. Like a friend of mine, Gary, who was there kind of helping us to, sponsor the retreat. One of the women was short a partner to be the other person, kind of as she was like doing with the mask making. So he helped her, because part of your process when you're doing it was to make sure as they laid all these pieces on, you'd have just a wet wash towel and make sure the nostrils stayed open while everything was settling and gelling, right? So he helped her while she was going through it. And as he got up saying, all right, I've helped you. She said, no. She goes, I want to do it with you too. I want to have the chance that I can make sure and keep those nostrils open. Mm-hmm. And he was like, all right. Mm-hmm. And so he laid down, and as she was sitting on the floor, she was having a little trouble getting comfortable with her body the way he laid down. Mm-hmm. And so she just kind of scooped up underneath him and pulled him up and nestled his head in her lap. And then just slowly, she would run I watched this whole thing happen. She kind of run her fingers through his hair, and she would like wipe around the nostrils as things were drying. And she started humming and singing these old tunes. And he cried and cried and cried, mm-hmm. and remembered everything about his mother that he missed, mm-hmm. and everything he wished could have been different. Everything that he wished as a child could have been different. He's a PhD, Harvard. He actually calls himself the most overprocessed man in America. He had the greatest teaching in that moment, mm-hmm. from that retreat. And he was there trying to hold the space, to help to hold the container. And as he shared, and which is my summary too, we started creating Gray Bear as a way to help others learn and to grow. And I realized how much it's just created who I am. Yeah. Who we all are. The process of doing this is the teaching.
It's such a personal transformation for you too.
Absolutely.
I mean, you're getting to witness people in their process. You're getting to co-create with nature. You're getting to build structures and also have, structures built and crumble within you.
Right,
and it's just, there's so much happening, in these 30 years of having this retreat center and doing this work. I can imagine it's impossible to summarize, but I'm curious of when you reflect on what the gifts have been and what the personal transformation has been for you. Can you begin to describe that?
Yeah, it's like, again, I love sharing the stories of this because it helps me so much. And I remember this moment when an opening circle, and we're still in the lodge at the time. And we have our instructor is a man who he does some psychosomatic teaching. He's like a trainer of therapists, like psychologist, psychiatrist. And so he teaches a mind-body way of being so in our process, like going through the wounds, through the womb to find the healing of who we are as human beings. Okay, as a part of his teaching. And so yoga and like ecstatic dance and breath work. And he was like, Gabriel Roth, some of the way, he's been doing this for decades and decades and decades. So really a pioneer in the work. And so we had this amazing circle sitting in people opening their hearts in profound, vulnerable ways and sharing in a way that you could barely contain the beauty of the moment. It's just so much your heart feels like it's going to burst. Mm-hmm. And while that's unfolding, it's evening time. We're there. It's like subdued lighting. Diann has this Indian sari over the top of us. And it kind of has these beautiful lights in it, like Christmas tree lights shining through, lovely setting. And as we're there present, just listening to these people, this instructor leans over and goes, "Hey, there's a possum on your porch." And there's this possum up on his legs, and his hands are up against the window, and he's just kind of bobbing and weaving and looking into the room. And like you could see this possum totally going like, what are these people doing? Like what's going on? And okay, stop the circle. Check this out, right? Like this is nature speaking. And it's like, it's lovely. It's funny. It's bizarre. It's in the moment. It's curious. It's the tension breaker we all need. Everybody starts laughing. It's all of it because even the lovely sharing had gotten so heavy that we could barely breathe. And we needed to take a break and like take a breath and remember the lightness. It's like, one of my yoga mentors shared a story. He said, he goes, you should always live your life. He goes, that our left foot is in the presence of the most almighty, divine God being imaginable. And know that your right foot is standing in a fresh cow patty you've accidentally stepped in.
Yeah, don't take things too seriously.
That's who we are as people. That's who we can craft ourselves to become.
Mm-hmm.
Honor the moment, be with it, and realize the lightness is there too. These things weave within us. And that's a lot of how Gray Bears created me and how I strive to live. We want to stay light enough that we can just like laugh and have fun and realize when a moment gets out of control and be present with that and not turn off. So sometimes, again, in the middle of, we may be doing a setting practice and just having a lovely, 10 days of silence, doing some Vipassana, having a beautiful peace. Mary Pafford teaches presence in yoga there. It's an 8-day, 10-day retreat. We weave a lot of intentional silence, and the right pileated woodpecker call or a hawk, listen to that. And we might even draw the whole group and say, listen to that call, be with it. It brings us right there in the moment. Nature is a teacher.
Mm-hmm. I'm so glad you brought up animals, because I think animals are always, bringing us back into the present moment. Like a bunch of the wildlife kept coming in the season that we were closed. And then the following season, we were seeing wildlife that I hadn't seen the whole time I had been there and hadn't visited for decades.
Wow.
And so we had this moose that, had staking claim on the lake.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm doing this story mapping session, and I'm like, create this like sacred space in the mouse hole, which is the little room that overlooks the lake, doing singing bowls around her body. And, everything's like really serious.
Right.
And out of the corner of my eye, I'm watching, there's a group of people doing paddleboard yoga on the lake.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this group that comes from Bozeman to kick off our season. And I started to see this moose like getting in the lake and swimming directly towards the paddleboard yoga people.
Right.
Trying to be present with Michelle, and she's really in it. And she starts to tell me about this like pretty tough thing that she has gone through. And I'm watching people just bail off of their paddleboards, like trying to get away from this moose, and everybody's panicking and freaking out. And, obviously you don't want a moose like coming at you in a lake.
Right.
And so they're bailing. Other people are like trying to drag their paddleboards out. It's just this whole scene. I have to tell Michelle, like, she has to see this. Like, she just like jumped up and was so excited, jumped up and looked out on the lake, and we both just watch from our, ivory tower, like watch this entire scene unfold. And it completely shifted the session.
It's so wild how we can sometimes be so trying to be present, we lose being present.
Right.
It's the journey of doing this. And so by trying to avoid the moose and not do it, you're actually not taking this beautiful, lovely life gift that was right there in front of you. One of our dear, dear friends was at Gray Bear, his partner. He leads some of the our juicing retreats we do. And he's an accomplished builder and an amazing visionary and quite an artist, and really knows the world of creative building. Well, myself and a couple of friends, we'd built the platform for this building, one we call the Falling Leaf Temple. And we're trying to build a special, a lovely dedicated space around it, and ran the ideas that we had past him. He goes, those are going to fail. And he goes, that's not going to work. And he's like, let me think about this a minute. And he had some life things going on, as we all do. And we had this really wonderfully talented Thai therapist who was there at the time, Lucas. And we had this platform we built. And so I said, why don't you go get a session with Lucas? It was in the fall. It was a gorgeous, gorgeous day. He went out. We set up the platform outside, and they were into their session. And I was walking by, and I kind of wanted to tell Lucas something I thought might be helpful for the session. based on what I knew about some history. And as I looked over at them, as I was walking towards them, it was one of these life moments where it was October. The air temperature was ideal. It was just cool enough, just warm enough. The air had this lovely quality to it. The sunshine was coming down. Colors were just exquisite. And when I looked over, I could see they were having this perfect moment. Like, oh no, this is not a moment to walk over and disturb. They're in it. Okay. I could just see it unfolding. And so I stepped away, and later my friend receiving the session, it was his first Thai session. He said, he goes, I had this thing well up in me about some of my ancestors and my life story. And he goes, I felt I was getting a little overwhelmed with emotion. I opened my eyes, and he goes, I saw this one leaf let go of a tree and started slowly circling through the sky and falling. And he goes, it would fall through this beam of sunlight and light up in this crimson, red, orange burst of color, and then circle through the blue and hit that light and light up again. He goes, it was the most unbelievable Steven Spielberg, George Lucas special effect, like, whoa, just lighting him up. And it fell and ended up landing right on his stomach. And he goes, in that second, I knew how to build your building. I knew how to do the roof line. He goes, it just clicked. And so he told me, he goes, I would like to donate my time to do this on one condition. We call it the Falling Leaf Temple.
Wow.
That's when my thought of how to do it, I had to let go of it. And it arrived. So learning to trust, this is the process we're in.
Wow. So, I think wrapping on that story is perfect.
Well, even to refresh you, this might even be the final wrap. You and I, when we were speaking last time, there's a thing I was about to tell you. And I said, you know what? I'll just share that story next time we talk. And it was a thing from my grandmother. Yeah, my grandmother told me one time, she said, I always think it's smart in life to every year go someplace you've never been and go someplace you've been several times to see how it has changed and how you have changed.
Adam Schumaker. Does anyone else find his voice and cadence of speech to be so calming? This conversation flowed like a high mountain creek, a consistent stream of nourishment, a story connecting one topic to another, naturally and without hurry. I've never met Adam in person, but I felt so easily connected to him in this interview. His ability to listen and affirm my shares, and seamlessly weave in his experiences with people, places, and his inner world. This interaction felt itself like breaking the cycle of the rushed, destination-based conversing, as we meandered from topic to topic as if we had all the time in the world. The timeless space that can be created when people are completely present with very little agenda. It was just so beautiful. To learn more about Adam Schumaker, visit graybear.org, where you'll find information about the center's spring and fall retreat schedule in Tennessee, as well as Adam's offerings within the space. A big shout out to Matthew Marsalek and the Drum Brothers, whose music you hear at the beginning and the end of this episode, as well as Dr. Jean Shinoda Bolin, who first turned us on to the phenomenon of the dandelion effect and how ideas move through the world. This podcast is brought to you by the Feather Pipe Foundation. Help support us and donate at featherpipe.com/gratitude, as well as leaving a review on Apple Podcasts with your feedback on a particular episode or this show as a whole. Also share episodes with your friends when you think they can be helpful. This is the most organic way that the show grows, and we even get to meet people at the ranch who first heard about us through the podcast. So keep the dandelion effect going, and until the next episode, have a beautiful day.